Good evening. I'm Spot On Weather meteorologist Matthew Euler, and tonight's presentation, we're going to call this Out with a Bang. What do we mean by that? Look at this picture of this snowman. He's got his guns ablazing. A winter is going to make a strong comeback here in early March, and this snowman is ready to go. So out with a bang as far as the winter weather goes, especially across the eastern United States and the mid-Atlantic. We got a lot to talk about tonight in the video, so let's get right to it. First things first, I'm going to go through a breakdown before we get into the longer range. I'm going to show you how this pattern will transition, starting with the forecast tomorrow on Tuesday, the 26th of February, 2019. All right, so by the way, all images, before I get going again, I want to give credit where credit is due, and all images I'm using, I pretty much cite them, all these thickness charts, the image here on the left, as I go through the presentation, that is courtesy again of Tropical Tidbits, tropicaltidbits.com, a great site for all kinds of model data, a lot of great weather information on this site. All right. So we're starting off the forecast tomorrow, Tuesday, the 26th of February, 2019. And what we're expecting for the Mid-Atlantic region tomorrow is a cool day, fairly seasonable though as far as temperature goes. An area of high pressure is situated around Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a 1039 millibar high, so it's fairly strong. It comes from a very cold source region. And we expect fairly light winds tomorrow across the mid-Atlantic. Not really very strong winds as that high pressure builds in. It's going to relax the pressure gradient, and it's going to result in lighter winds and seasonable temperatures. We're not looking at a very developed, a very deep upper level trough. The amplification's not there in the short term period of the forecast. So dry and cool tomorrow for this Tuesday the 26th if you get out and about around the mid-Atlantic region. We're expecting high temperatures to be quite seasonal in the lower to middle 50s across southeast Virginia. And the upper air pattern, if I look at this chart in this image, the blue dash lines indicate where the coldest air is. The red dash lines is where the warmest air resides. Thickness in the atmosphere is directly proportional or equivalent to the temperatures. So the lower the thickness values, the colder the temperatures, the higher the thickness values, the warmer the temperatures. The upper air pattern here, when I look at this chart, these lines, these dash lines, these red dash lines, these blue dash lines, are pretty much orientated west to east. Not much of a north to south component in the way these lines are, basically the way the lines are set up on the chart. So we have more of a west to east zonal look tomorrow. That's why we're getting a lot of westerly winds, especially today on Monday, the 25th of February. We had a lot of westerly winds today across the area. So not much waviness or amplification of the jet stream yet. So looking good tomorrow, another dry day. It's been a very wet period across southeast Virginia and the mid-Atlantic recently. We have got the subtropical jet stream. It really got going. The weak El Nino officially arrived about a week ago. That never really materialized as forecast for the winter until just recently. So we got a more active southern storm track. We have that the past 10 days and a lot of wet weather. So this is good news tomorrow. Moving on now to the forecast to Wednesday, the 27th of February, 2019. This looked a little more robust earlier in the period. We still got fairly zonal flow, west to east winds across the area. Whenever you get an orientation of west to east zonal flow, you really don't get the amplification you need for heavier precipitation and bigger storms. We do have an area of weak low pressure over Ohio, 1016 millibars on Wednesday, and we may see some scattered rain showers into the Carolinas, up into the mid-Atlantic. There is a 1033 millibar high situated over South Dakota, and there's another high pressure system situated over Vermont, New Hampshire area at 1029 millibars. There's a little area of snow extending from eastern Wisconsin into lower Michigan and then into western New York State and Pennsylvania. And there's another area, if you're traveling on Wednesday out west, there's another storm system that's moving into central and northern California. And the continuation of a lot of systems just crashing into the west coast continues. Overall, though, for the mid-Atlantic, for southeast Virginia, maybe some scattered showers, but we're not really expecting anything heavy. This may just actually be, looking at the latest data, this may actually just be an increase in cloud cover for a little bit on Wednesday, more than anything. High temperatures are going to be in the middle to upper 50s after morning lows in the upper 30s on Wednesday. So staying very seasonable across southeast Virginia and the mid-Atlantic as a whole. For example, southeast Virginia's average high temperature right now is about 53, 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Moving ahead now to Thursday, the 28th of February. This is the last day of February, so we're about to turn the calendar over to March, starting this Friday. So on the last day of February, what kind of weather can we expect? Really, still not much change. There is an area of low pressure that develops, but it's well offshore off the southeast coast. It has some rain showers associated with it, not going to impact the East Coast in any way. There's high pressure across New England, 1024 millibar high over New York State. So we do have some cooler northeasterly flow. There is some moisture gathering out to the west, out into Missouri, southern Illinois, southern Indiana, down to Tennessee, and also into Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And that moisture out to the west of the mid-Atlantic, that's going to be our next rainmaker come Friday. If you look at the orientation of the dash lines here, once again, the thickness lines, they're generally lining up from west to east, which again still indicates fairly zonal flow. The winds are pretty much fairly horizontal, blowing from west to east. A new system moves into Idaho, producing some mountainous snow, as well as some rain showers at lower elevations. And then some more snow is falling out in the Sierra Nevadas out in California. Overall, the high temperature on Thursday, really not much change. Fairly constant temperatures this week. Highs in the middle to upper 50s, after morning lows in the upper 30s once again on Thursday. Okay. But again, that next storm system is gathering moisture out to the west. That's going to be a little bit of rain moving through here on Friday. Here is Friday, the 1st of March, 2019. So what's it looking like? First day of March. Things start changing a little bit. We do have some scattered rain showers in the area. If anything, if this system from Thursday, as it migrates to the east, moves to the east, we're not expecting a heavy downpour, but we are expecting more coverage in shower activity come Friday. That's the way it looks right now. All right. There is an area of lower pressure, 1,005 millibar low, in the lee of the Rocky Mountains there in southeast Colorado. There's a lot of blue there in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, southern Minnesota, Iowa, into Nebraska and South Dakota. And then really what's going on here, I see the changes starting to occur. The thickness lines are generally west to east still, so I don't see much amplification in the polar front jet stream just yet. But if I look upstream or to the northwest of the mid-Atlantic over southern Canada, I'm starting to see some very low thickness values, 492 decameter thickness values, some 486s, 486 decameter thickness up over Alberta, Canada. And that is showing, if I compare charts with you, we look back at the 28th of February, it's not as cold. But then if I look at the 1st of March, we're starting to see that cold air starting to really build up, back up over Montana in the Dakotas, and again, coming down from Alberta, Canada. And that cold will start making its move towards the mid-Atlantic and the East Coast starting Saturday, the 2nd of March. So Friday across the mid-Atlantic, what kind of weather can we expect? Mostly cloudy conditions. We do expect high temperatures in the upper 50s, possibly reaching 60 degrees, but really shouldn't be much change based on this zonal west to east flow. Now, let's move ahead to Saturday, the first weekend of March. You got plans to be outdoors across the mid-Atlantic. Things get a little rainier from Friday to Saturday. You see more in the way of rain shower coverage by Saturday, the 2nd of March. You also notice a 1053 millibar high over in the lee of the Canadian Rockies over Canada and to southeast Alberta. The front side of this high is bringing a lot of cold air from the north to south. So we're getting very low thickness values now over North Dakota, into northern Minnesota, into northwest Wisconsin, 492 decameter thickness values. Very frigid air, especially considering we're moving into March now. Another storm system crashing into California. There's rain and mountain snow out over the state of California at this time on Saturday. So that southern storm track remains active. A lot of storms moving into California. Um, if you look along the East Coast, there's a lot of rain shower activity from the Florida Panhandle this Saturday up through the Carolinas, Virginia, into Pennsylvania. Where you get into the coldest air, that's where you're going to get into some snow. If you have travel plans to go up to New York State, into western PA, into Ohio, there are some snow showers going on at that time. So this is just something we're getting this cold front that's going to come through Saturday evening, and that's really going to start opening the floodgates for the colder Arctic air to make one more push into the mid-Atlantic. You see the low pressure system over New Jersey on Saturday with a strong cold front extending southwest into Tennessee. We have rain showers in the mid-Atlantic ahead of that cold front. We start to see a sharper amplification or a deepening of the trough. Amplification of that polar front jet stream. Extremely cold air is beginning to descend into the upper Midwest. You can see the strong colder air. It's pouring into Iowa, Wisconsin, on strong northerly winds, Illinois, Indiana. Now, let's move on to Sunday, the 3rd of March. Now, Sunday, if you have weekend plans, it's almost a repeat of last weekend. Sunday looks like the better day of the two right now. Rain on Saturday, the 2nd. Drying out, but much colder come Sunday the 3rd, so you are going to need a coat in the mid-Atlantic area if you venture outside. A couple features on this chart I want to point out. First of all, our thickness now has crashed from about 555 decameters down to 537. We have about a 20 decameter drop in thickness values between Saturday and Sunday. There's very strong Arctic high pressure situated over Alberta. It's building southeastward into the Midwest. Very cold temperatures, much below normal temperatures in the Midwest come Sunday. And that air is seeping ever so much to the east over the mid-Atlantic. Notice to the south, there's rain. The green represents the rain, and that is hanging out over South Carolina, southern Georgia, southern Alabama, southern Mississippi, along the Gulf Coast in Louisiana. Why? Why is that important? Okay, we're starting to get a really favorable, more ideal pattern or setup for a possible winter storm next week across the mid-Atlantic. For the mid-Atlantic on Sunday, the colder air is going to arrive on the stronger northerly winds. Arctic high pressure remains over Alberta, Canada, but it's building southeast. It's pushing this cold chunk of air out of Canada, out of that source region, southeast towards the eastern U.S. and the mid-Atlantic. We do expect dry weather across the mid-Atlantic Sunday, so Sunday right now looks like the better of the 2 days. Notice this green shading on the Gulf Coast, along the Gulf Coast, right there around the Gulf of Mexico. That's a stalled frontal boundary with those rain showers along the Gulf Coast. Now, why is that important? It's important for future storm development along the East Coast. Right? We have cold high pressure building in across the northern U.S. into the mid-Atlantic. We have moisture down in the south along a stalled frontal boundary. And what will happen over time is we'll get areas of low pressure that are going to form along that frontal boundary in the deep south along the Gulf, and then start riding up the East Coast a little bit. Here is the forecast for Monday, the 4th of March, 2019. The temperatures remain slightly below normal at this point. We do have some moisture now. I'm looking at the moisture out to the west on this image, the blue representing the snow into Arkansas, Oklahoma, into Kansas, a mix of rain and snow possible across eastern Texas, northern Louisiana. That mix can extend as far south as central Mississippi into central Louisiana, and then just cold rain along the Gulf Coast come next Monday. We have reinforcing shots of cold air to the north that's keeping the coldest temperatures locked in place from the Midwest right into the mid-Atlantic. And again, look at the moisture gathering with the blue shading there to the west of the mid-Atlantic. That could possibly result in our next weather maker. Okay, there's dry weather across the mid-Atlantic again on Monday, but very cold, colder than normal temperatures. Again, that stalled frontal boundary remains along the Gulf Coast. Now, this is where things get interesting, and the models are not 100% in agreement. They're going to change. All right, this was the GFS model run I'll show you the European run here in a minute, but we're showing you the image on the left is for Tuesday, March 5th. Tuesday, March 5th at about 1 p.m. Eastern Time. 1,010 millibar low develops along this stalled frontal boundary along the Gulf of Mexico. It develops and moves off the Carolinas, 1,010 millibar low. Colder air to the northwest of that storm center indicates the blue shading and wintry weather. Southeast Virginia into the Carolinas. Image on the right, we're moving ahead a little bit in time. Now we're talking the evening, Tuesday evening, March 5th, about 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The area of low pressure moves slowly northeastward up the coast. We still have some moisture wrapping around the low pressure center into the mid-Atlantic, Southeast Virginia, into North Carolina. Will this air be cold enough? That is the question I'm really wondering right now. Will the air be cold enough aloft to support wintry weather into Southeast Virginia all the way to the coast? What about the rest of the area, the region, the Mid-Atlantic? Now, this image right here, not showing much of a slam dunk type upper air trough, but it may still be cold enough for wintry precip nonetheless. So this is just something we got to keep a close eye on. I talked about past videos about March winter storms. They can still happen across the Mid-Atlantic. So we're not out of the woods yet, in the spring yet. And then I'm moving ahead the images now. This is Wednesday morning, the 6th of March. There's some light snow on the backside of the low pressure system as it continues to move east-northeast away from the East Coast. On both images, there's some light snow into Southeast Virginia and in North Carolina. So that low pressure, as it moves away, the pressure gradient will increase between that 1038, 1037 millibar high over Iowa. Clockwise flow around that high pressure system over Iowa. Counterclockwise circulation around low pressure systems in the northern hemisphere. So as that low pressure pulls away, the winds increase from the north. Temperatures will then drop down further. Here's a couple things about this system. Amplification of the trough is key. If we have a more amplified pattern with a stronger dip to the jet stream, there will be colder temperatures and we could very well see a stronger storm system, which could result in more winter weather, more widespread winter weather across the Mid-Atlantic. If we have weaker amplification of the jet stream, in other words, it doesn't dig out as deep, then we're looking at warmer temperatures and weaker storm system and more in the way of rain. So this is why it's so important this time of year to really keep a close eye on the upper level dynamics. Now, I wanted to show you this image because this shows you models are converging on storm development somewhere off the southeast coast between 4 and 7 March. Now, the image on the left is FV3 GFS. The image on the right is the Canadian model. All right, both of the models are showing a 1,007 millibar low situated off the southeast coast. The FV3 GFS is much further to the southeast, keeps a heavier precip south of the Mid-Atlantic region. The Canadian on the right brings that low pressure system further up the coast. See the difference in the placement of that low pressure center? And that's what makes forecasting so challenging, especially with wintry type precip events. But what I want you to focus in on is the fact that GFS is showing something, right? The FV3 GFS, that's showing something. The Canadian on the right is showing something. So now the track and the intensity varies between the models, but the consistency is showing up. Additionally, some models are depicting multiple weaker storms versus one big storm event. So there are a lot of details yet to be worked out. We are a good 7 days to 8 days out from this possible event. So a lot is going to change, I can promise you that, between now and then. We could be looking at more cold air, Arctic high pressure pushes the frontal boundary to the south and keeps it there, and the storm track remains south of the Mid-Atlantic, right, south of New England. Could just be cold and dry. We could be looking at less amplified polar front jet stream, which then results in less cold air, and maybe the storm moves up the coast a little further and it's all rain. And that's what we're looking at right now. I just want to show you guys, I want to show everybody tonight that the models are showing something, and the 12Z models today were really in agreement with the general synoptic pattern, with the dip in the jet stream, with the trough shifting east, core of the coldest air coming in next week between the 4th and the 8th of March. Here is the European model forecast. Now notice the unsettled look to this. The green shadings, the orange shadings, the red shadings, that indicates precipitation. The red shading indicates heavier precip amounts. If you notice, I'm looking at thickness charts. Now this is for Sunday evening. So the European brings some moisture in Sunday evening, as early as Sunday evening, to southeast Virginia. Image on the right shows this would be another system midweek, early Wednesday morning, the 6th of March on the right. So we have Sunday evening on the left. The image on the right shows a Wednesday morning. So the European is showing two separate systems. But you notice the unsettled look. The precipitation is there, just draped along the Gulf or along the East Coast, from the Gulf Coast up to the East Coast. So there's a lot of areas of low pressure being stamped by the European in multiple locations along the East Coast. Where that area of low pressure actually ends up will be critical to who gets what type of weather. You will notice these blue lines. Look at the image on the right. The Euro is really deep with the cold. All right, very cold looking model today as compared to yesterday. You have some bitterly cold air over eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois. On the image on the right there, by next Wednesday, the 6th of March. Really severe cold. Very strong northerly winds, very strong colder air advection. And yeah, it's going to be bitterly cold, and that's going to shift the core of the coldest air east to the East Coast over time. Here is an image of a big push of cold air to the East Coast on the GFS image on the left, FE3 GFS on the right, showing similar thickness values. Now the FE3 GFS a little bit colder than the regular GFS, but nonetheless, these thickness values are very low. There's consistency between all operational models regarding colder air moving into the eastern U.S. So we have a high confidence of this occurring, a colder pattern for next week, the first week of March. There's a lot of variability as to how far south the cold air settles, and hence how amplified the upper air trough becomes. And again, that's going to be very key into whether, as far as whether we're going to get actual storm here in the mid-Atlantic or not. And this is the push of cold air on both the Canadian image on the left and the European model on the right. That European model on the right is showing some bitterly cold air spilling all the way south. You got a rain snow line down into central Mississippi and Alabama into Georgia. Extremely bitterly cold air over the upper Midwest at this point in time on the image on the right by Wednesday night, the 6th of March, Wednesday evening. Either case, very similar, very good agreement in the establishment of a colder pattern next week from the Midwest to the East Coast. Right. Now, after this particular pattern, this trough will eventually lift out and upper level ridge will build back in. We are expecting a return to milder temperatures after the 8th of March. So it's going to be one heck of a push of cold here next week. Here is some other images indicating the colder pattern ahead. Image on the left is showing the European model. This is the 2-meter temperature anomalies. So these are the temperature anomalies closest to the surface. Green shading image on the left indicates temperatures on the order of 10 to about 14 degrees Fahrenheit below normal for temperatures. The purple shading is even more significantly cold air from negative 18 to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit below the normal high. Right? So you're looking at some very cold air, the purple shading and the green shading spilling all the way to the East Coast. The core of the coldest air remains over the central plains and upper Midwest. Image on the right shows the GFS. This is the 18,000 foot temperature anomaly, and there's a very strong upper level low situated just north of Lake Huron over eastern Ontario, and that's going to spin. It's going to spin a lot of colder air on its backside down into the lower 48 to the east. This is the Climate Prediction Center forecast this evening, And really, based on what we've been looking at in all the model data, it's no surprise that this is the official Climate Prediction Center forecast from NOAA, showing image on the left is a 6 to 10 day outlook, valid from March 3rd to March 7th. Image on the right is an 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, valid March 5th to March 11th, 2019, showing you probability of below normal temperatures. Image on the left is showing a probability of 65 to 70% below normal temperatures in the mid-Atlantic. Image on the right is showing generally 60 to 70% probability of below normal temperatures as well. So the image on you can see where the darkest purple shading is here on these charts. That indicates the highest probability of much below normal temperatures. So you still see the coldest airs back over the Midwest for the 6 to 10 day period on the left, and then over the northern plains in the Midwest at the 8 to 14 day outlook on the right. All right, so now we've got cold in place. In the past 10 days, we've had a lot of rain. Temperatures have not been exceptionally warm, really, but we're trying to get the right combination of cold. Okay, we want this cold, but we want moisture with it. If you want to see a few flakes of snow across the Mid-Atlantic, we need the combinations to match up. Cold air and moisture. We've either had, it's just been a really strange winter. We've had either cold air and dry conditions because the Arctic high is building in, so the air is too dry, the air mass is too dry, and all the storms are going into the Midwest. Or you finally get an active southern branch of the jet stream, a lot of southern storms rolling through, and you get all this rain, but it's just warm enough to stay liquid. All right. So now let's take a look at the model snowfall forecast. So we see we got all this cold air in place. All right. Image on the left is showing you the European model snowfall forecast for the Mid-Atlantic. I'm showing you an image of North Carolina and Virginia. The scales on the right, that's the amount of snow in inches. So as of the 00Z 25 February European model output, it indicates 3 to 5 inches across southeast Virginia and the Hampton Road cities around the 5th of March. The image on the right is the GFS, the American GFS model, showing about 3 to 5 inches as well. That 3 to 5 inches is mainly down to the Carolinas, a little bit southwest of Hampton Roads. So 2 to 4 inches for Hampton Roads around the 5th of March. But do you notice something here? Okay, we looked at the models. We know something's going to be off the coast. We got a high confidence level with the placement of some type of low pressure system off the coast. Okay, unsettled pattern on the European, a lot of moisture, and look at how these snowfall maps kind of match up, which is really crazy, being that they're 240 hours out. Now, 240 hours equates to 10 days. A lot can change between now and the next 10 days. So I'm not trying to, just show you snowfall charts to get you all excited. I wanted to show you that I'm really impressed with the way these are matching up so far out in time. Today, anyway. This could all be different tomorrow based on the newer model runs, the model data that comes in. This is the 12Z. This is the updated European run. This is the 12Z run today. So the image on the left in this slide I just showed you, we're looking at 3 to 5 inches of snow across southeast Virginia. More snow, 3 to 5 inch totals. There's some higher amounts back in the mountains off West Virginia and the Appalachians and up the coast into New Jersey and Delaware. Notice how it went from 3 to 5 inches last night's run to this afternoon's European run. Wow. Now we're talking 6 to 8 inches across Hampton Roads. Somewhere between the 4th and the 7th of March. Okay. Again, this could change. But now the European has shown 2 straight model runs where we got some accumulating snows across the Mid-Atlantic region, okay, all the way to the coast. So I'm just looking at the trends of everything. This is the European temperature forecast for Norfolk, Virginia. So generally this week, fairly seasonable. I think these temperatures, on the European are a little bit too cool. February 26th, tomorrow, 46 degrees for a high. It'll be a little bit, probably about 7 degrees warmer than that, probably about 53 tomorrow with that sun out. 47, 49 Thursday. And then look at the drop off though. I want you to pay attention to Sunday, March 3rd to Thursday, March 7th. And that could be the period we get some kind of precipitation to move in, the moisture to move in overrunning the colder air at the surface. So we have a high of 37 degrees this Sunday, according to the European model. 36 degrees Monday, March 4th. 39 on Tuesday, March 5th. 37 on Wednesday, March 6th. And then 36 on Thursday, March 7th. 5 straight days, sub 40 degree high temperatures. So yes, it would be cold enough for sure to get this. But we're going to have to see if everything aligns like it needs to in order to make it happen. So here are my final thoughts on tonight's video. Winter is looking to go out with a bang, and that's why I named this video Out with a Bang tonight. That snowman's got his pistols, he's got his guns. He's ready to fire that cold air down from Canada. So we're looking at colder than normal temperatures the week of 4 to 8 March in the eastern U.S., which will make it feel much colder than the calendar indicates. We're going into March. We got some stronger solar radiation. We're getting longer daylight hours. The sun's getting higher in the sky again, and yet, boom. I tell you what, I might get my wish. Shamrock shakes and snowflakes. We are looking at an exceptional agreement today between all of the major models. Amazing agreement. This is the first time I've seen the models line up. The midday models today were amazingly in agreement. I did take a look at the 18Z GFS, the 18Z FV3 GFS, and generally they're keeping a fairly similar pattern. I don't see any significant differences from the earlier runs. But the European, the GFS, FV3 GFS, and the Canadian, they're all in general agreement with the cold air and the trough placement coming in next week. The differences in the timing, strength, and track of the low pressure systems do exist, however. Not all models have the storm track, as we looked at. The placements of these lows are not the same. Okay, image on the left, FV3 GFS. Image on the right, the Canadian. See, the FV3 GFS further south, Canadian further northeast. So that's what I'm talking about when I mentioned that in my final thoughts. So we do have differences in the timing, the strength, the track of low pressure systems, and that will continue. That will continue. So don't expect any changes in that. We'll keep watching it and see how things evolve over the next week. There is potential for wintry weather across the Mid-Atlantic between the 4th and 7th of March 2019. Now, we know it's not panned out very well this winter. I've seen some really favorable patterns, but the timing just hasn't been there with moisture and cold. So if the air is cold enough, there could be accumulating snowfall across the region. The models are showing something. European, the latest model, 6 to 8 inches across Hampton Roads. The GFS is showing about 3 to 5 inches in some locations. So we do have to keep an eye on it. Stay tuned though for more specific updates as we get closer, as the models will be changing quite a bit between now and then. For example, the storm tracks weaker systems versus stronger system, extent of cold air, and the best dynamics of lifting. It's all going to change. It's all going to change the next 7 days. So stay with us in Spot On Weather. Will the core of the coldest air come crashing south, or will the core of the coldest air remain to the northwest of the Mid-Atlantic? That's what I'm curious to see as well. Right now, the models are going all out and saying this cold air, the core of the cold air is going to crash south. But we're going to have to wait to see what happens over time. Perhaps we just get chunks of cold and then brief warm-ups in between those chunks of cold air. All right. And that's when if you want winter weather, you gotta hope that you get the moisture during those periods of colder weather, not the in-between periods. So right now the models are indicating a very cold below normal situation for next week, March 4th to March 8th. Great implications as far as the core of the coldest air. If it comes all the way down to the southeast U.S. into the mid-Atlantic, there's a great probability we're going to see some frozen precipitation. But if the core of the coldest air remains up over the Midwest, there's a good possibility we could see rain. We have increasing sun angle again, increasing solar radiation again. Days are getting longer. So it's going to start, that increasing sun angle and the solar radiation is going to eventually start playing into air mass modification and warming air masses and modifying them as they come from Canada. Spring-like temperatures are looking likely, so if you don't like any more winter weather, I've got good news for you, because we have a strengthening southeast ridge indicated by some of the longer range models after the 8th of March. What does that mean? That means those temperatures are going to warm up. It'll start feeling like spring. We're starting to see a lot of blooming of plants already. That's already happening this spring. So, okay, that wraps things up tonight. Spot on weather. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I'll tell you what, if there's a winter storm coming in the following week, look out. I'm going to go ahead and make a special video for that. All right, that wraps things up. It's spot on weather. Remember, if we're not spot on, we're not doing it right. Have a great Monday evening, everyone.